This is going to be our agency podcast for talking about solutions that are for results-driven marketers and ideas and insights, specifically in the vein of user experience, which we're extraordinarily passionate about, SEO, which we are also extraordinarily passionate about, and conversion optimization, which we're also extraordinarily passionate about, and how all of these things are connected. We're going to talk about just our own experience, problems, solutions, insights, and pains that we encounter internally marketing ourselves and externally that we face with some of our clients. What's your biggest pain these days in the vein of SEO? You do a lot of SEO. You do a lot of content marketing for Gulo as obviously our VP of strategy. What are some of the things that you encounter that are real challenges?
I think the couple things that come to mind on that are for SEO and what kind of challenges there are is, number one, just understanding where the algorithm sits. And BERT is coming out now. So what will that do? How are our rankings, going to be affected by these things, with this sort of perpetual back of your mind, like, this looks great today, but what will it look like tomorrow? Literally tomorrow will my featured snippet be gone? We've seen featured snippets show up, go away, and come back. And I think that's really just sort of the unease of SEO for me right now. The good news is it depends on what you need the SEO for. If you're in an e-commerce situation and this is driving every conversion and transaction for your business is online, that's a much deeper concern than us who are positioning ourselves, and maybe another organization or association is trying to position themselves as a thought leader, or providing knowledge to the industry. Having a number one ranking or a featured snippet is great, but it isn't as critical of a piece. So I think that's one thing. But for those that this is critical, or that you sort of want to tout where you're at from an SEO perspective, just in the back of your mind, knowing that it might change. And then the other thing is just understanding the right kind of backlink strategy and how important backlinks really are. We know they're important. We know they're a major signal. We know all the components of the authorities of the sites that are linking to you, what those links look like and how they're worded, all matters. But to find the energy and the time for a small business to nurture an ongoing backlink campaign, regardless of what kind of organization you are, I think is a real challenge to understand. We've had sites link with rate with minimal backlinks, but also those keywords have not been super competitive. So for me, what sort of nags at me is how do we up our backlink game? How do we help our clients with their backlink game to make sure that that's pushing everything forward?
Yeah, and there's, just to speak to first the BERT update that I believe was now 2 weeks ago. There was a strong reaction from people, digital marketers and other digital agencies, really, that were like this big visceral reaction of, oh no, when am I going to fall off the cliff? When am I going to fall off the cliff? And the general takeaway from me and the people I trust in the marketplace is that don't worry about it, is just keep doing what you're doing and putting out great content and really trying to speak to your audience and speak specifically about what you do, whether that's an organization talking about nutrition, or an e-commerce selling nutrition bars, or a CPG in sort of like in sort of pharmaceuticals. Like, you gotta put out things that speak to your audience and resonate with your audience, because Google is just constantly
Yeah.
running these little micro tests on whether or not people are clicking through to your site and whether they're staying there. And that ultimately is going to be the gauge of where you sit in your ranking. So
Yep.
um, that's become my takeaway in the last
Yeah.
couple weeks, and I think some of the people that I respect that's their takeaway too. um
Hmm.
and
Good
and then
SEO is good SEO, right? And if
yeah,
you drop a little
exactly.
bit, hang tough, make some modifications based on what you know, perhaps, but it's still, the cream still rises to the top at the end of the day,
Right,
it seems.
right,
Yeah.
right, right. And there was, from with some of our clients, there was a little bit of we saw some trends leading up to it.
Yeah.
If we're looking back at historical in the weeks leading up, there were some dips, and then Burt came out, and those things actually came to rise. We saw that with a handful of clients, which was really interesting. You
Yeah.
know, it's hard to understand it. In hindsight, you can see what was happening, but as we're watching it on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, you're like, what's changed, what's happening,
Yeah.
etc. And you do get a little paranoid, but in hindsight, it was because there was these rollouts were coming out, and they were testing the waters, and now all of those are continuing to level out a little bit. So
Yep.
um
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think if there's one other thing that I think, as far as an educational perspective goes, talking with clients and even looking at it ourselves, um, what, and this isn't a new topic. People have been talking about this for a while, but what really are the ramifications to an organization, by having featured snippets, by having people also ask, by having videos, all the elements that are on a results page now, can actually almost be overwhelming. The knowledge panel, etc. These are keeping people from clicking through to other sites. And how do you strategize your SEO to take advantage of that, so you're not just a victim of it, but you can actually take advantage of it and speak up the chain at your organization to say, well, our clicks are fewer because of a featured snippet or whatever it might be, but it doesn't, and that affects click throughs per se. But the idea that people are still getting the information from us and our authority in the industry or whatever it might be. Again, we're not talking about transactional e-commerce. We're talking about sort of providing value and thought work and thought leadership out into the world. Um, they're still getting a lot of their information from us because we're ranking well, but clicks are going down, and when you look at something like the people also ask, those can vary. I was reading something where you can, I mean, if you start clicking on those, they start expanding up to 20 or 30 of those little bars can stop popping up. Once that's sort of the rabbit hole you go down, Google's like, hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that you might want to know about. And
right.
that's also a part of like, how important are your H2s within your primary post to accommodate some of those questions. It doesn't
Right.
have to necessarily be the title of your post is what that question has to be. It can be somewhere in your H2. So just from a copywriting perspective, really, and it kind of goes back to that idea of the conversational web as well, where we want to be in more speaking terms with our readers, as opposed to some sort of topical situation, or maybe feel it more like a newspaper headline. This has to be like asking people the question in written form, so that Google understands what you're trying to answer through your post. And I think that's a little bit of a nuancy kind of for a newbie SEO. That's a nuance that you want to consider for sure.
Right. And on that, so a couple of things there. I mean, one, I want to talk about the, those conversational web phrases. And if you
Yeah.
remember last week, we were in a meeting that with a client that they're not producing a lot of new content, and they're frustrated because they're
Yeah.
not expanding their audience and things like that. And we did a little bit of research, and we did some surveying of their current customers, and lo and behold, what came up? How to do X.
Yes.
Remember?
Right. That's right.
And it was
That's right.
like, well, so there's two things. There's two things there is targeting your content to again, your audience, and answering those questions for your audience, especially in the world of associations, because you're an authority. You need to be the provider of those answers, and you can write content that answers specifically those questions. And then two, which another thing that you touched on really lightly, is what's the cost of doing nothing? We have another client we're working with where they've completely stagnated because they're not producing more content, and their audience has been flat for a year and change. And you look back at the historical data, and they haven't produced anything of value. They're producing this content that's got 10 words on a page, and it's like, you're not gonna court anybody with this really like low value content that doesn't answer questions. And so so there's a lot there. And you go back to another thing that you were alluding to is just what's your holistic digital strategy, right?
Exactly.
Like what it,
you're either in it or you're not. It's not something you can dabble in.
Right. And so you do have to have some framework for that, even if it's like 5 bullet points on a whiteboard. You got to look at that and tell yourself, what are we doing? You can only fight so many battles. So anyway, there's a lot there. It's kind of it's a great conversation.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for checking out the podcast today. Go to gulosolutions.com to learn more about us. Subscribe to our newsletter. Also, if you can hit subscribe on our channel here on YouTube, that would be great as well.